Hello, welcome to Lil's Vintage World. This video is going to be a book review of Sally on the Rocks by Winifred Boggs. This video is all in conjunction with the British Library Women Writers series blog tour that is happening for 4 new release titles as part of the British Library Women Writers series. I'm sure by now you know that I just love this series. My favourite books are books that are part of the early to mid 20th century, all about women and their lives, and these books are just perfect for that. So I love them, I adore them, and I found some absolutely terrific gems in them too, including this one. Now, if you want to go and check out some of the other bloggers and read what they're saying about these wonderful books, then you can do so. Go and check out the British Library and their social media, so their Twitter and their Instagram, and then the links will be within their pages. So now let's get on to my thoughts and feelings of Sally on the Rocks. So Sally on the Rocks was first published in 1915, which is a really important date to note, so bear that in mind. And we first meet our main character Sally when she's living in Paris. She's just received a letter from a woman called Maggie who resides at Little Crampton, which is an English village. And in Maggie's letter, she discusses lots of different things. And one of those things that she discusses is the most eligible bachelor that now resides in the village as well, a Mr. Bingley, not to be confused with the Mr. Bingley in Jane Austen. That is a very different character. This Mr. Bingley is awful, but he's wonderful. Anyway, I digress. So Sally's reading this letter and she decides, that's it, time's up, I'm going to go back to England. So she leaves Paris. Paris at this time, remember, this book was published in 1915, has felt the effects of war already. War is rumbling across Europe, and Paris has been affected, and she has seen things, and she's not happy. She's in her mid-30s, she's unmarried, she doesn't have children, and she wants that. She wants that safety and stability, and she thinks she can get it in England with Mr. Bingley. So off she goes to England, and she stays with the vicar who, when she was younger, was her, I suppose, guardian. And he's absolutely wonderful. He's a lovely character. And she stays with him and she meets Mr. Bingley, but she realises very quickly that there is competition. And it is a case of let the best woman win in terms of who is going to end up marrying Mr. Bingley. Mr. Bingley is a man of wealth, a man of position. He's not necessarily the most handsome man, the desirable man for these 2 women that are battling for his affections, but he is the most eligible bachelor. He is, if you want a safe marriage, that is one that will be considered a good match. And all this is going on. And then Sally meets a soldier, and she actually saves a soldier. And we learn about him and his life and the difficulties that he's having adjusting back into civilian life. And that is where I'm going to leave it for the story. Hopefully I've left you with enough to intrigue you that you want to go and read this book for yourself. Because, oh my goodness, it was spectacular. The writing is poetic. It's amazing. So much so, I'm going to read you a little snippet, as I often do. Part that I'm going to read you is actually just over halfway, when Sally, her past, and someone from her past has kind of come back and causing a bit of difficulty for Sally. So here we go. There had only been one thing to matter in her life, and that was over and done with years ago. It was a dead thing. Let the dead past bury its dead. To let what had been spoil what might be was against the whole philosophy of logic and life. It meant walking in the shadows instead of the sunshine, clinging to the dead hands instead of the living. She would forget. Only it was awkward when the past became the present, as it had a way of doing, and come hurtling into life that was sought to thrust it back. Oh, it's just such beautiful writing style. Now, I'm not into poetry, but I find this poetic license running through this book's veins, and I think it's just beautiful. I loved it. I also think the writing matches the theme of the book in terms of the date. As I said, 1915 it was published. It's published during the First World War, during the Great War. And it's written in a way which is odd, because when I read it, I'm not necessarily sad when I read it. There are some really sad points, there's some really harrowing points of this novel. But when I read it, I do have this emotion, and I enjoy my reading experience of it, despite the fact that sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm happy. I just feel very fulfilled, if that makes sense. And I think to progress this further, what makes this book so good in terms of the writing is how she's written the characters. So we have these bunch of characters. As I said, the Reverend is lovely. He's such a nice man. I love him. And I do feel a lot of sorrow for him. You'll learn his backstory, and yes, that's quite sad. And then Sally, originally I didn't like Sally. I was like, she's coming here to try and get her mitts on a man that she's never met because he's got money and he's a safe bet. And I was like, I don't like that. I know it's a different time, okay? This is a different time. This is early part of the 20th century where that was an acceptable thing to do in terms of matrimony. You know, a woman is looking for a place of safety, and that's where she thought it would be. But I didn't like her. Then I learnt her backstory, and then I loved her. And I really fell for Sally, and yes, just love her. And then we have a couple of other characters. I won't name names because I don't want to spoil it for you, but oh, I loved to hate these characters, and there's a couple of them. One I think is slightly worse than the other, but oh, the meddling, I love it, and it was so fantastic. I think my favourite character, although that's difficult to say really, but a character that I really connected with unusually was the soldier. I thought the soldier was extremely well written. So the soldier that you meet, he has a backstory that you learn, and he is really struggling adjusting to civilian life, really struggling. And Sally is there and she's trying to help him as best as she can. And he is written so well. He isn't written as this soldier, this hero that's come back, you know, well done, everyone loves him. He's not written like that at all. He is a flawed character like every single one of the other characters. He is also flawed. And he is written so well. I have never been to war, I've never been a soldier. My grandfather was a soldier, but he never spoke about that to me. That was a part of his life that was very clearly not something that he wished to discuss. Fair enough, he's seen some horrible things. But from the soldier, I really got that this was a real person. And it made me think about Winifred Boggs. We know very little about Winifred Boggs. We know where she was born, we know when she died, we know that she wrote she did write novels, you know, this wasn't her only one. But other than that, where is her connection in the world? Did she have a brother that was a soldier or friends that were soldiers? Because this soldier is written so well. I read quite a lot of books on war. I find it quite interesting's not the right word, but because my grandfather was a soldier, I do have this kind of natural connection. I am intrigued. So I do like to read them, but this book, I've never read anything like it. For me, this book feels like the reality of the Great War. We have the home front, and we have the women still trying to continue their life of what it would be like to be an Edwardian woman. And we have the soldiers coming home and the difficulty that they face adjusting to civilian life. And in a way, this book hasn't really aged in that sense, because there is still a lot of problems that continue now when soldiers come back from war-torn countries and they've left the army or whatever, you know, service they served under, and they are struggling again to readjust to civilian life. It affected people then as it did now, and people need help to do that. And I feel like this is a fantastic example of what life during the Great War was. I adored it. I thought it was magnificent. I hope that I have intrigued you enough to go and pick it up. It's a book about a woman that wants life, that wants safety, and love is something that just doesn't quite come into it initially. So is the way for the Edwardian woman, so to speak. So I hope I have intrigued you enough to go and pick it up. You'll have to let me know in the comments if I have. Is this one that's now added to your wish list? Do you already own it? I'd love to know. If you want to get your hands on a copy of Sally on the Rocks by Winifred Boggs, I will leave the link to the British Library shop where you can buy it, and also there's a range of others in this series as well, and of course their crime classics that they do, and just generally have a nose on the British Library shop because it is fabulous. So that is it for my review. I really look forward to talking to you about it in the comment section below, and I shall see you soon for next video. Bye for now.